I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Rain tapped against the windshield as Griffin Langley pulled his truck into the driveway. The dashboard clock read 9:37 p.m., later than planned, but the Harises had asked numerous questions about their new dining table. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, watching water stream down the glass. His muscles ached from loading the heavy oak piece. Working with his hands had always been his refuge, the clean geometry of wood, the honesty of sweat, the tangible results of labor. Unlike people, Wood never lied. Griffin grabbed his jacket and made a dash for the front door. The house was quiet, but a soft glow came from the living room. He hung his wet jacket and followed the light. Maeve sat curled on the couch, her attention fixed on her phone. She didn't look up when he entered. "Hey," Griffin said, his voice gruff from disuse. Maeve's eyes flickered upward briefly. "Hey." Her fingers continued moving across her phone screen. The Harises loved the table. "That's good." Griffin stood there a moment longer, water dripping from his hair. "Did you eat?" "Yeah. There's pasta in the fridge if you want." He nodded and headed for the kitchen, retrieving the container of leftover pasta. He ate standing at the counter. After 10 years of marriage, he'd grown used to their routine, but lately something felt different. A creeping distance, subtle but present. When he returned to the living room, Maeve was smiling at her phone. "What's funny?" he asked. "Just something Sawyer sent." She looked up, her smile fading slightly. "He's thinking about starting a podcast. Wanted my opinion." Griffin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "At 10 at night? We've been texting all day." Maeve set her phone down. "He's trying to figure out if it's worth investing in equipment." Griffin sat in the armchair across from her. "What's it about?" "Urban exploration. He's been getting into abandoned buildings lately." She picked up her phone as it buzzed again. "You should hear some of his stories. He's found some amazing places." "Sounds illegal." Maeve's face hardened. "Not everything's black and white, Griffin. Breaking and entering usually is." "He's not breaking anything." She shook her head. "Why do you never get him? You've known him for years." "Known of him," Griffin corrected. "Your friend, not mine." Maeve's phone buzzed again, and her attention returned to the screen. Griffin watched her face soften as she read the message, her fingers quickly typing a response. He stood up. "I'm going to shower." She nodded without looking up. Under the hot spray of water, Griffin tried to wash away the uneasy feeling crawling up his spine. Sawyer Keene had always been there, hovering at the edges of their relationship. Maeve's best friend since childhood, the guy who'd shown up at their wedding with that smug smile, who called at odd hours, who always seemed to need something from Maeve. Griffin had never said anything. He wasn't the jealous type, and Maeve had the right to her own friendships. But lately, Sawyer's presence felt heavier, more intrusive, and Maeve seemed to be slipping away, her attention constantly divided. When Griffin finished a shower and returned to the bedroom, Maeve was already there, still on her phone. "Sawyer wants to come over for dinner tomorrow," she said without preamble. "I said it would be fine." Griffin paused, a towel in his hand. "Were you going to ask me?" "I'm asking now." She looked up, challenging. "Is it a problem?" "It's a weeknight." "So?" Griffin draped the towel over a chair. "I have an early meeting with a client on Thursday." "We won't be up late," Maeve countered. "Besides, you hardly talk when he's here anyway." The comment stung more than it should have. "Fine," Griffin said, his voice even. "Whatever you want." Maeve smiled, already typing on her phone. "Great. I'll let him know." Griffin climbed into bed, his back to his wife, listening to the soft tapping of her fingers on the screen. In the darkness, the sound seemed to echo, each tap widening the invisible crack between them. Griffin spent the next day in his workshop, the familiar smell of sawdust and varnish wrapping around him like a security blanket. He worked methodically on custom shelves, measuring twice, cutting once. Jonas, his longtime employee and friend, worked quietly at the other end of the space. "Everything okay, boss?" Jonas finally asked during their lunch break. Griffin took a bite of his sandwich. "Sawyer's coming over for dinner tonight." Jonas nodded knowingly. "Ah, that explains the extra sanding." "What do you mean?" "You sand more when you're stressed." Jonas gestured to the perfectly smooth pine board on Griffin's workbench. "That piece could be used as a mirror now." Griffin set down his sandwich. "He's around too much." You ever talk to Maeve about it? She doesn't see it. Jonas took a swig of coffee. Maybe it's time you made her see it. The words followed Griffin home that evening. He arrived early, deciding to help with dinner as a peace offering. Maeve seemed surprised to find him chopping vegetables in the kitchen. "You're home," she said, setting down her purse. "Thought I'd help with dinner." He kept his eyes on the cutting board. Maeve moved to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients. "That's nice of you." They worked in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the knife hitting the board the only conversation. Finally, Griffin spoke. "How was your day?" "Good. Busy." She paused. Sawyer called during lunch. "He's excited about tonight." Griffin continued chopping. "Why?" "What do you mean, why?" Maeve stirred the sauce on the stove. "He likes spending time with us." "With you," Griffin corrected. "With both of us. He's just not comfortable around you because you're always so cold to him." Griffin set down the knife. "I'm not cold. I'm careful." "What's that supposed to mean?" Before Griffin could answer, the doorbell rang. Maeve wiped her hands and went to answer it, leaving Griffin alone with his thoughts and a half-chopped onion. Sawyer's voice carried down the hallway, animated and loud, followed by Maeve's laughter. Griffin took a deep breath and returned to his chopping, his movements more precise, more controlled. "Griffin!" Sawyer entered the kitchen, arms outstretched as if greeting an old friend. The man of the house, hard at work. Griffin nodded a greeting, not looking up. "Sawyer, need any help there?" Sawyer moved closer, peering over Griffin's shoulder. "I got it. Come on, Griff," Maeve said, entering the kitchen. "Let Sawyer help. He's actually a great cook." "I'm almost done." Griffin scraped the onions into a bowl and set the knife in the sink. "All yours." He moved to the living room, leaving Maeve and Sawyer chatting in the kitchen. He could hear them laughing, sharing inside jokes and stories he wasn't part of. The sound grated on him. Dinner was a performance, with Sawyer center stage. He told stories about his urban explorations, each tale more exaggerated than the last. Maeve hung on every word, asking questions, laughing at all the right moments. Griffin ate silently, watching. "So there I am, 3 stories up on this rusty fire escape," Sawyer was saying, gesturing with his wine glass. "And I hear this noise below me. I shine my flashlight down, and there's this massive raccoon staring back at me." Maeve gasped. "What did you do?" "The only thing I could do. I started talking to it. 'Hey, buddy, I'm just passing through. No need to call security.'" He laughed at his own joke. "The thing just watched me like it was judging my life choices." "That's because it was," Griffin muttered. Sawyer's eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile remained. "Not everyone gets the appeal of exploring forgotten places, Griff. It takes a certain adventurous spirit, or a disregard for property law." "Griffin," Maeve warned. Sawyer set down his glass. "No, it's fine. Griffin's just concerned about my well-being." "Right, Griff. Don't call me that." "Sorry, Griffin." Sawyer emphasized the name. "Maeve always says I take too many liberties with people I consider close friends." "Is that what we are?" "Griffin." Maeve's voice rose sharply. Sawyer leaned forward. "I like to think we could be. After all, we both care deeply about Maeve." Something in his tone made Griffin look up. Sawyer was watching him with an expression that wasn't entirely friendly, despite the smile on his face. "Some of us made vows to her," Griffin replied evenly. "Vows are just words," Sawyer shrugged. "What matters is being there for someone emotionally, understanding them at their core." He turned to Maeve. "Like how I knew exactly what you needed after that fight with your mother last week." Griffin's head snapped up. "What fight?" Maeve shot Sawyer a look. "It was nothing. Mom was just being difficult about Thanksgiving plans." "You didn't mention it." "Because I knew how you'd react," Maeve replied. "You tell me to stand my ground and not give in. But sometimes that's not what I need to hear." "What do you need to hear?" Sawyer answered before Maeve could. "That it's okay to prioritize peace over principles sometimes. That relationships are complex and require flexibility." He gave Griffin a pointed look. That not everything has to be black and white. The same phrase Maeve had used the night before. Griffin felt something cold settle in his stomach. "And you're the expert on relationships?" "I'm an expert on Maeve." Sawyer reached across the table and squeezed Maeve's hand. "I've known her longer than anyone. That doesn't mean you know what's best for her." Sawyer's smile turned smug. Maybe you should ask her who she turns to when she really needs emotional support. Griffin looked at Maeve, whose face had gone pale. Maeve, Sawyer's just being dramatic, she said, pulling her hand away. We talk, that's all. About things you don't tell me. Because you don't understand. Maeve's voice rose. You see everything in terms of right and wrong. Problems to be fixed. But sometimes I just need someone to listen without judging. And that's not me. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Griffin stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I think I've lost my appetite. Griffin, don't. Enjoy your dinner. He looked at Sawyer, whose smug expression had returned. Both of you. Griffin walked out of the dining room, grabbed his jacket, and stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with moisture. He sat on the steps, listening to the muffled voices from inside. He couldn't make out the words, but Sawyer's laugh carried through the walls, clear as a bell. When the door opened behind him some time later, Griffin didn't turn around. He's gone, Maeve said. Are you coming inside? Is that what you want? She sighed. Don't be like this. Like what, Maeve? He turned to look at her. Like a husband who doesn't appreciate another man undermining his marriage. He wasn't undermining anything. He's my friend. Friends respect boundaries. What boundaries has he crossed? Maeve demanded. Being there for me? Listening when I need to talk. Telling you I'm not enough. Maeve's expression softened slightly. He didn't say that. He didn't have to. Griffin stood up. It was implied in every word. You're overreacting. Am I? Griffin stepped closer to her. Then tell me why you share things with him that you don't share with me. Maeve crossed her arms. Because he doesn't make me feel stupid for having feelings. The words hit like a physical punch. Griffin took a step back. Is that what you think of me? I think you're a good man, Griffin. But you don't understand how to deal with messy emotions. Everything's a problem to be solved. And Sawyer does. He understands me. Maeve's voice hardened. And he was right about one thing. You were completely rude tonight. He provoked me. He was trying to be friendly. Maeve threw up her hands. God, Griffin, why can't you see that? He's important to me. More important than me. The question hung in the air between them. Maeve didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation told Griffin everything he needed to know. I think I'll stay at the apartment tonight, he said quietly. Running away again. Maeve shook her head. That's your solution to everything, isn't it? Just walk away until it's all neat and tidy again. What do you want from me, Maeve? I want you to apologize to him. Griffin stared at her. Apologize? Yes. Call him and apologize for being rude. Maeve's eyes were hard now. Or we're done. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm setting a boundary, she snapped. He was here before you. He's more important than you. And I won't let you push him away. The words hung between them, awful and final. Griffin felt something cold settle in his chest. I see, he said quietly as he walked past her into the house, grabbed his keys from the hook by the door, and walked back out. Maeve stood on the porch, arms crossed. Where are you going? She demanded. Griffin didn't answer. He got into his truck, started the engine, and drove off into the night, Maeve's words echoing in his mind that he was here before you. He's more important than you. Those were lines you couldn't uncross. 3 days past. Griffin stayed at the small apartment above his workshop. It was sparse, just a bed, a table, a kitchenette, and a bathroom, but it was clean and quiet. He'd kept it as a rental property, but the last tenant had moved out a month ago. Now, it served as his refuge that he didn't call, didn't text, turn his phone off except to check for client messages. He worked from dawn till dusk, losing himself in the precision of his craft. The apartment filled with the scent of coffee and sawdust that clung to his clothes on the first night. He sat on the bed and stared at the blank wall until the sun came up on the second night. He took out a legal pad and began making notes. Organized, methodical. On the third day, when Harper showed up at the workshop, Griffin was prepared. You look like hell, his sister announced, sweeping into the space with her characteristic lack of subtlety. She carried a box from her bakery, which she set on his workbench. And you not answer your phone. I've been busy. Griffin didn't look up from the cabinet he was sanding. Too busy to tell your family you're still alive. That made him pause. How did you know where I was? Jonas called me. Harper perched on a stool, watching him. Said you've been working nonstop for days and sleeping upstairs. Said you wouldn't talk about it. Griffin set down the sandpaper. There's nothing to talk about. Maeve showed up at the bakery yesterday, Harper said, watching his reaction, asking if I'd heard from you. His hands stilled. What did you tell her? That my brother doesn't confide in me. Harper's voice softened slightly. But that if he did, and if he was hurting, I want to know why. Griffin remained silent. Griffin, Harper pressed. What happened? He met his sister's gaze. She told me Sawyer was more important to her than me. Harper's eyes widened. She said that? Those exact words. He was here before you. He's more important than you. Griffin quoted, the words still fresh in his mind. Then she gave me an ultimatum. Apologize to him or we're done. Apologize for what? For not worshiping at the altar of Sawyer. Griffin's tone was flat. For questioning his constant presence in our lives. Harper was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? Nothing. Nothing. Griffin turned back to his work. There's nothing to do. You could talk to her. Try to work it out. She made her choice. Harper slid off the stool and moved closer. Griffin, 10 years of marriage is worth fighting for. I'm not the one who stopped fighting. He picked up the sandpaper again. She chose Sawyer. Now she can live with that choice. So you're just giving up? No. Griffin's voice was steady. I'm respecting her decision. Harper studied her brother. This isn't like you. You don't know everything about me. Harper, I know you love her. Griffin didn't respond, just continued sanding with smooth, even strokes. Fine, Harper said after a moment. Be stubborn, but at least eat something. She gestured to the box she'd brought. Sourdough and some of those cheese scones you like. Thanks. Harper headed for the door, then paused. Griffin, he looked up. Whatever you decide to do, I'm on your side. Her eyes, so like his own, were fierce with loyalty. Always. After she left, Jonas emerged from the back room where he'd been working on inventory. Your sister's right, he said quietly. You should eat. Griffin set down his tools and opened the box. The scones were still warm. He broke one in half and offered part to Jonas, who accepted it with a nod. Have you thought about what you're going to do? Jonas asked after a moment. Yes. Care to share? Griffin took a bite of scone, chewed thoughtfully. Not yet. Jonas nodded, respecting the boundary. Let me know if you need help. With anything. Actually, Griffin said, there is something you could do. Later that afternoon, Maeve showed up at the workshop. Griffin heard her car before he saw her, the familiar sound of tires on gravel. He set down his tools and waited by the workbench. She appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Not the put-together Maeve he was used to seeing. You're not answering my calls, she said. Griffin said nothing. I've been worried sick. Her voice cracked. I didn't know where you were. Still, he remained silent. Are you seriously not going to talk to me? Anger crept into her tone. After 10 years, you're just going to shut down? Griffin watched her, his face impassive. I know I said things I shouldn't have. Maeve continued, stepping further into the workshop. I was angry. You were being so unreasonable about Sawyer. Nothing. Griffin, please. Tears welled in her eyes. Say something. Anything. He studied her face, searching for the woman he'd married. The one who'd once looked at him like he was her whole world. He couldn't find her. I miss you, Maeve whispered. Please come home. Griffin finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Did you mean what you said? About Sawyer being more important? I was upset. You know how I get when I'm upset. That's not an answer. Maeve wiped at her eyes. Of course I didn't mean it like that. He's my oldest friend, that's all. Friends don't try to come between husbands and wives. He's not trying to. Yes, he is. Griffin's tone left no room for argument. And you're letting him. Maeve's expression hardened. So this is my fault. Your choice, your consequences. What's that supposed to mean? Griffin turned away, picking up a piece of sandpaper. It means I need time to think. Griffin, go home, Maeve. Not without you. He turned back to face her. I'm not ready. When will you be ready? I don't know. Maeve stepped closer, her eyes pleading. Let me stay. We can talk. I have nothing to say right now. Griffin, please. She reached for his hand. I love you. He pulled away. If that were true, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Maeve flinched as if he'd struck her. What are you saying? I'm saying actions speak louder than words. Griffin's gaze was steady. And your actions have been very clear. One mistake. Was it just one? Griffin challenged. Or the culmination of many? Maeve fell silent, her eyes darting away from his. That's what I thought. Griffin turned back to his work. I think you should go. Griffin. Please, Maeve. For the first time, emotion cracked through his voice. Just go. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and left. Griffin listened to her footsteps fade, to the sound of her car starting up and driving away. Only then did he set down his tools, his hands shaking slightly. He took out his phone and turned it on. 37 missed calls from Maeve. 12 from Sawyer. 2 from Harper. 1 from Jonas. Griffin deleted all the voicemails without listening to them. Then he called Jonas. She came, he said when Jonas answered. And nothing's changed. Griffin looked at the legal pad on his workbench, at the notes he'd been making. Did you find anything? Jonas was quiet for a moment. Yes, but you're not going to like it. Jonas arrived an hour later, a manila folder tucked under his arm. He set it on the workbench between them. I need to know what you're planning, Griffin, he said, his hand still resting on the folder. Before I show you this. Griffin met his friend's gaze. I'm planning to protect myself. From what? Whatever's in that folder. Jonas studied him. This isn't like your usual projects. This is personal. Yes. And messy. Potentially. Jonas sighed. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Some things, once known, can't be unknown. Griffin gestured to the folder. Show me. Jonas opened it and spread out several printed pages. Sawyer Keene, age 39. Never married, no kids. Moves around a lot, 5 different addresses in the last 3 years. Griffin scanned the information. Employment, spotty. Sales jobs, mostly, never lasting more than a year. Currently self-employed as a consultant, whatever that means. Jonas pointed to another page. But here's where it gets interesting. Check his social media. Griffin looked at the printouts from various social media platforms. What am I looking for? The women. Jonas tapped several photos. See a pattern? Griffin studied the images. Sawyer with different women, arm around their shoulders, always looking a little too comfortable. Friends. Ex-friends now. Jonas handed him another sheet. My cousin Ellie used to work with this woman, Diane. She was close friends with Sawyer until her husband filed for divorce. Apparently, Sawyer was always at their house, always calling Diane, always needing something. Griffin felt a chill run down his spine. The husband thought they were having an affair. That's just that they weren't. Not physically anyway. Jonas leaned forward. According to Ellie, Sawyer just inserted himself between them. Made the husband feel like he wasn't good enough. Made Diane depend on him emotionally. By the time the husband figured out what was happening, it was too late. Griffin was quiet, thinking of Maeve's words. He was here before you. There's more, Jonas continued. Lena Harper's roommate, she's a paralegal. She helped me pull some public records. He slid over another document. Sawyer's been sued twice for unpaid loans, both by former friends. Griffin picked up the paper. How much? $15,000 from one, $23,000 from another. Jonas tapped the document. Both cases were settled out of court. He borrows money from friends and doesn't pay it back. Looks that way. Jonas hesitated. There's something else. Something Lena found when she was digging deeper. Griffin waited. Bank records. Jonas pulled out another paper. From your joint account with Maeve. Griffin's stomach dropped. How did you get these? Maeve gave Harper access to your online banking last year. Remember? When you were both traveling and needed her to pay that contractor. Jonas looked uncomfortable. Harper still had the password. She asked Lena to check it. Griffin took the printout. For withdrawals, spread over the last 6 months. Each for $5,000. $20,000, he said quietly. To where? Cash withdrawals, Jonas replied. But on the same days, deposits of the same amounts show up in Sawyer's checking account. Griffin set the paper down, his mind racing. Maeve has been giving him money. Without telling you. From our joint savings. Jonas nodded. What are you going to do? Griffin was silent for a long moment. Then he gathered the papers, putting them back in the folder. I need to talk to Lena. About what? Legal options. Griffin's voice was calm, measured. If Maeve is taking money from our account without my knowledge to give to another man, I need to know where I stand. Jonas studied his friend. Griffin, Are you sure this is the right approach? Maybe you should just confront Maeve first. No. Griffin shook his head. Not yet. I need more information. What kind of information? Everything. Griffin's eyes were cold. Everything about Sawyer Keene. And everything about where I stand legally. Jonas sighed. This won't end well. It already hasn't ended well. Griffin set the folder aside. Now it's about damage control. That evening, Harper brought Lena to the apartment above the workshop. Lena was tall and sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a leather portfolio and had the focused look of someone who took her job very seriously. Griffin, she greeted him with a firm handshake. Harper told me you need legal advice. I need information, Griffin corrected, gesturing for them to sit at the small table. About my options. Lena set her portfolio on the table. Based on what Harper told me, you're concerned about marital assets being misappropriated. Yes. And you're considering separation? Griffin hesitated. I don't know yet. Lena nodded. Fair enough. First, let me tell you what I know about your situation. She opened her portfolio. You and Maeve have been married for 10 years. You own a home together with both names on the deed. You have joint savings and checking accounts. You own your business outright, but the property it's on is jointly owned. That's right. And recently, you discovered that Maeve has been withdrawing large sums from your joint savings and giving them to a third party, a male friend named Sawyer Keene, without your knowledge or consent. Yes. Lena made a note. How much in total? 20,000 that we know of. That's significant. Lena looked up. What was the money for? I don't know. Have you asked Maeve? Not yet. Lena studied him. May I ask why not? Because I want to understand all the facts first. Griffin's voice was steady. And I want to know my options before I confront her. Lena nodded. Smart. In cases like this, information is power. She pulled out several documents. Here's what you need to know. In a marriage, assets acquired during the union are generally considered marital property, regardless of whose name is on the account. So the money Maeve took was partly yours, yes, Lena confirmed, which means you have grounds for concern. However, proving financial misconduct in a divorce proceeding is complex. You need to show that Maeve intentionally wasted or misused marital assets, like giving them to another man, potentially, depending on the reason. Lena spread out several papers. What you need right now is documentation. Bank statements showing the withdrawals. Any communications between Maeve and Sawyer about money. Evidence of what the money was used for. Griffin nodded. What about my business? Your business is more protected since it's in your name only, Lena explained. But any increase in value during the marriage could be considered a marital asset. And the house. Joint property. In a divorce, you'd either need to sell it and split the proceeds, or one of you would buy out the other's share. Lena looked at him directly. Are you considering divorce, Griffin? He didn't answer immediately. I'm considering all options, including reconciliation, if possible. But even as he said it, Griffin heard Maeve's words again. He's more important than you. Lena nodded. Then my advice is this. Gather information, but be careful. There's one more thing, Harper interjected. When I was checking the bank records, I found something strange. Maeve signed a document authorizing use of Griffin's business assets as collateral for a loan. What? Griffin's composure slipped for the first time. When, 2 months ago, Harper looked uncomfortable. I asked Lena to look into it. Lena pulled out another document. It appears Sawyer was applying for a business loan to start a podcast production company. He needed collateral and somehow convinced Maeve to use Griffin's business as security. Is that legal? Griffin's voice was tight. She doesn't own my business. It's complicated, Lena admitted. She signed as your wife, claiming spousal authority. In some cases, that's sufficient. What does this mean? It means if Sawyer defaults on his loan, your business assets could be at risk. Lena's expression was serious. However, there's a loophole. If you can prove Maeve signed without your knowledge or consent, and that Sawyer was aware of this, you might have grounds for a lawsuit against Sawyer for fraud. Griffin felt something cold and calculating settle in his chest. What would I need to prove that? Evidence that Sawyer knew you hadn't authorized it. Lena closed her portfolio. It won't be easy, but it's possible. Griffin nodded slowly. Thank you, Lena. One more thing. Lena added. Whatever you decide to do, do it soon. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to protect your assets. After Lena and Harper left, Griffin sat alone at the table, thinking. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a pattern he couldn't ignore. Sawyer wasn't just an intrusive friend. He was actively undermining Griffin's marriage and financial security, and Maeve was letting him. Griffin picked up his phone and turned it on. More missed calls from Maeve. A text message. Please talk to me. We need to fix this. He typed a response. We need to meet. Tomorrow. Neutral ground. Her reply came almost instantly. Yes. Where? Griffin thought for a moment. The part by the lake. Noon. I'll be there. I love you. Griffin didn't respond to the last part. Instead, he turned off his phone and went back to the legal pad where he'd been making notes. At the top of a fresh page, he wrote, Evidence needed. The park was quiet at noon on a weekday. Griffin arrived early, choosing a bench with a view of the lake. The day was overcast but dry, the water a flat gray mirror reflecting the cloudy sky. He sat with his hands in his pockets, waiting. Maeve arrived 5 minutes late, walking quickly along the path. She wore a green sweater he'd given her last Christmas, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she spotted him, she slowed, as if suddenly uncertain. Griffin didn't stand as she approached. He watched her sit beside him on the bench, leaving a careful distance between them. Thank you for meeting me, she said. He nodded once, saying nothing. Griffin, Maeve began, then stopped. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth. She looked out at the lake. I miss you. That's not what I asked for. Maeve's hands twisted in her lap. I'm sorry for what I said. About Sawyer being more important. It wasn't true, wasn't it? No. She turned to face him. You're my husband. I love you. Griffin studied her face, looking for signs of the woman he'd married. Then explain the past 6 months to me. What do you mean? Sawyer. The constant texts. The late-night calls. The emotional dependence. Griffin's voice remained even. Explain it to me. Maeve's gaze dropped. It's complicated. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. Sawyer and I have always been close. You know that. But lately, things have been different. Different how? He's been going through a rough time. Lost his job. Had to move apartments. She spoke quickly now, the words tumbling out. He needed someone to talk to. And that someone had to be you. I was just being a friend. A friend who gives him $20,000. Maeve's head snapped up, her eyes wide. How did you? Bank statements don't lie, Maeve. Griffin's voice hardened slightly. For withdrawals of $5,000 each, all coinciding with deposits of the same amount into Sawyer's account. I can explain. Please do. Maeve's hands twisted tighter. He needed help. For his podcast startup. It was just a loan. A loan you didn't discuss with me. From our joint savings. I was going to tell you when it started making money. And has it? Maeve's silence was answer enough. What else haven't you told me, Maeve? She looked away. Nothing important. Using my business as collateral for Sawyer's loan isn't important. The color drained from Maeve's face. Who told you that? Does it matter? Griffin's eyes were cold now. What matters is that you did it. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. He needed collateral for the business loan, Maeve said weakly. He said it was just a formality. That nothing would happen to your business. And you believed him. Yes. Because he's more important. The words were quiet but sharp. I didn't mean that, Maeve insisted. I was angry. You were being so judgmental about him. With good reason, apparently. Maeve fell silent, staring at her hands. Griffin waited, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, he asked, Is there anything else I should know? Maeve didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was barely audible. Sawyer told me he has feelings for me. Something cold settled in Griffin's stomach. When? A few weeks ago. And? Maeve looked up, tears in her eyes. And I was confused. Flattered, maybe. Flattered. The word tasted bitter. It didn't mean anything. Did you act on it? Again, the hesitation. We kissed. Once. After he told me. She rushed on. But it was a mistake. I told him right away it couldn't happen again. Griffin nodded slowly, processing. And this kiss. When was it? About a month ago. Before or after you authorized him to use my business as collateral? Maeve flinched. Before. I see. Griffin stood up, needing to move. So to summarize, Your friend declares his feelings for you. You kiss him. Then you give him $20,000 from our joint savings and authorize him to use my business, my livelihood, as collateral for his loan. All without telling me. When you put it like that, how else should I put it, Maeve? For the first time, emotion cracked through his voice. How would you have me understand this? It was a mistake. Tears ran down her cheeks now. A stupid, awful mistake. I got caught up in his problems and trying to help him, at the expense of your marriage. No, I never wanted to hurt our marriage. Intentions don't matter, Griffin said, the words falling like stones. Actions do. I'll fix it, Maeve promised. I'll tell Sawyer to pay back the money. I'll revoke the collateral agreement. Can you? I think so. I'll try. Griffin nodded once. Do that, and then? Will you come home? Hope crept in her voice. Griffin looked at her for a long moment. No, Griffin, we're done here. Maeve stood up, reaching for his hand. Please, we can work through this. Griffin stepped back, avoiding her touch. You made your choice, Maeve. Now I'm making mine. What does that mean? It means I need time to think about what I want. His voice was steady again, controlled. And right now, what I want is space. For how long? As long as it takes. Maeve wiped at her tears. I love you, Griffin. I made a mistake, but I love you. Griffin studied her face one last time, memorizing it. The woman he'd married. The woman who'd betrayed him. Goodbye, Maeve. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing by the bench. He didn't look back, even when he heard her call his name. Each step felt like a decision, a choice to move forward without her. When he reached his truck, he sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Lena? It's Griffin. I need your help with something. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Griffin moved methodically, precisely, like he was crafting one of his custom pieces. Every step calculated, every move planned. First, he set up a separate bank account, transferring half of what remained in the joint savings. Then, he documented everything. Bank statements showing the withdrawals, the collateral agreement Lena had obtained, text messages Jonas had helped him recover, but he changed the locks on the workshop and filed paperwork to formalize his ownership of the business property. Lena helped with this, finding a loophole in the original purchase agreement that allowed for simplified transfer of ownership. Are you sure about this? Jonas asked one evening as they worked late. Once you start down this road? I'm sure, Griffin replied, his focus unwavering. Harper was more direct when she visited the next day. This is war, Griffin. Are you prepared for that? He looked up from the legal documents spread across his workbench. Not war. Strategy. Same things sometimes. She perched on a stool, watching him. Maeve came by the bakery again yesterday. Griffin paused. What did she want? To know if I'd heard from you. She's tried calling the workshop phone since you won't answer your cell. What did you tell her? That my brother is an adult who makes his own decisions. Harper's gaze was steady. Was I wrong? Griffin shook his head. No, she's a mess, Griffin. Not my problem anymore. Harper studied him. Is that really how you feel? Griffin didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. She betrayed me, Harper. Not just with the kiss, that's almost secondary. She gave him our money. She put my business at risk. She chose him. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices. Griffin set down the document he was holding. And now I'm making mine. Harper nodded, accepting his decision. Lena says the paperwork should be finalized by next week. Good. And the other thing? The screenshots. Griffin's expression hardened slightly. Ready when needed. With Jonas's help, Griffin selected specific screenshots of conversations between Maeve and Sawyer, just enough to raise questions. To plant seeds of doubt among their mutual friends, he sent them to 3 people. Carter and Delia, who had been their closest couple friends for years, and Ryan, Maeve's cousin who had always treated Griffin like a brother. Just the screenshots, no commentary. The response was swift. Carter called that evening. Griffin, what's going on, man? His voice was concerned. Delia and I got these messages, and we don't know what to think. What do they look like to you? Griffin asked, like Sawyer's trying to come between you and Maeve. Carter hesitated. Is that what's happening? Is that why you've been MIA? Yes. Shit. A pause. What can we do? Nothing. Griffin said. Just know the truth. Ryan's call came the next morning. Less diplomatic, more angry. That son of a bitch. I always thought he was too close to Maeve. What are you going to do about it? Handle it my way, Griffin replied. Need backup? Not yet. Delia didn't call. She showed up at the workshop with a casserole and a determined expression. You're not staying in this sad apartment alone while this plays out, she announced. You're coming to dinner tonight. No arguments. Griffin found himself almost smiling for the first time in weeks. Yes, ma'am. The stage was set. The narrative was beginning to shift. And Griffin was just getting started. It didn't take long for Maeve to realize what was happening. 3 days after Griffin sent the screenshots, she showed up at the workshop again, this time with anger rather than tears. What are you doing? She demanded, storming into the space where Griffin was sanding a table leg. Carter and Delia won't talk to me. Ryan hung up on me. Griffin set down his sandpaper calmly. I told them the truth. You showed them private conversations out of context. The context is our marriage, Maeve. Griffin's voice was even. The one you betrayed. I made a mistake. Her voice rose. One mistake. And I'm trying to fix it. By doing what? Griffin challenged. Have you gotten the money back from Sawyer? Have you revoked the collateral agreement? Maeve's silence was telling. That's what I thought. Griffin turned back to his work. You're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to avoid consequences. That's not fair, isn't it? Griffin looked up at her. You chose Sawyer over me. Over our marriage. Over my business. Those are your choices. Now you're facing the results. So this is revenge. Maeve's eyes flashed. Turning our friends against me? I didn't turn anyone against you. Griffin corrected. I showed them evidence of what you and Sawyer were doing. They made their own decisions. Evidence? Maeve laughed bitterly. You make it sound like a crime. Fraud usually is. That stopped her. What are you talking about? The collateral agreement, Griffin said calmly. Using my business without my knowledge or consent as security for Sawyer's loan. That's fraud, Maeve. I didn't. Yes, you did. Griffin's voice hardened. And so did Sawyer. He knew I hadn't authorized it. He knew you were going behind my back. And he did it anyway. Maeve paled slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying there are consequences for actions. Griffin set down his tools. Legal consequences. You're suing Sawyer. Disbelief colored her voice. I'm protecting what's mine. Griffin met her gaze steadily. Something you should have done as my wife. Griffin, please. Her anger gave way to fear. This is getting out of hand. No, Maeve. It got out of hand when you gave Sawyer $20,000 of our money and used my business as collateral for his loan. Griffin's tone was final. This is just the correction. What do you want from me? Desperation crept into her voice. Nothing. The word hung between them, simple and devastating. I don't believe that, Maeve said finally. 10 years of marriage doesn't just end over a mistake. It wasn't just a mistake. Griffin's voice was quiet. It was a choice. You chose him. I was confused, and now I'm clear. Griffin turned back to his work. I think you should go. Griffin. Now, Maeve. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and left, the workshop door closing behind her with a heavy thud. Later that day, Jonas reported hearing from mutual friends that Maeve was telling a different story, that Griffin was cold, emotionally distant, that he'd walked out without giving her a chance to explain. She's trying to control the narrative, Lena observed when Griffin called her with the update. It's a common tactic. What do we do? Nothing yet, Lena advised. Let her talk. The evidence speaks for itself. And the lawsuit against Sawyer will change the conversation anyway. When do we file? Tomorrow, if you're ready. Lena's voice was careful. But Griffin, once we do this, reconciliation becomes much harder. There isn't. The response came quickly. Not anymore. The lawsuit was filed the next morning. Griffin versus Keene, alleging fraud, misrepresentation, and financial damages. Lena had structured it carefully, focusing on Sawyer's actions rather than Maeve's, though she was named as a witness. The reaction was swift. Sawyer called Griffin directly, something he'd never done before. What the hell is this? He demanded when Griffin answered. Consequences, Griffin replied calmly. For what? Being there for Maeve when you weren't. For fraud, Griffin corrected. Using my business as collateral without my consent or knowledge. Maeve consented. Sawyer's voice rose. She signed the paperwork. She didn't have the authority to do that. Griffin's tone remained even. And you knew it. This is bullshit, Sawyer spat. You're just jealous that May finally realized she can do better than a cold, controlling. Griffin hung up. No point in engaging. The legal process would handle it now. But Sawyer wasn't done. That evening, he and Maeve showed up at Carter and Delia's house while Griffin was there for dinner. The confrontation was ugly. You turned them against me, Maeve accused, tears streaming down her face as she stood in Carter and Delia's living room. All of you. Maeve, that's not what happened. Delia tried to explain, her voice gentle but firm. We saw the messages. We made our own decision. What messages? Sawyer demanded. What lies has he been spreading? Griffin, who had been silent until now, pulled out his phone. These aren't lies, Sawyer. They're your own words. He opened the screenshots and handed the phone to Carter. Show him. Carter held out the phone so both Maeve and Sawyer could see. The messages were clear. Sawyer telling Maeve not to tell Griffin about the money. Sawyer suggesting Griffin wasn't good enough for her. Those are private conversations. Sawyer snapped. Taken out of context. What's the context that makes this okay? Carter asked, his voice hard. Telling my friend's wife to hide finances from him? You don't understand. Maeve began, but Delia cut her off. We understand enough, she said quietly. I think you both should leave. You're taking his side. Maeve looked betrayed. We're recognizing the truth, Carter replied. And the truth is, you and Sawyer crossed a line. This isn't over, Sawyer warned, glaring at Griffin. You think you can control the narrative? Watch me. Over the next week, Sawyer tried to rally support, reaching out to mutual friends with his side of the story. But the evidence Griffin had already shared was damning, and Sawyer's desperate attempts to reframe it only made him look worse. Then Lena called with news. The lender has been notified of the fraud claim, she reported. They've put a freeze on any attempt to collect against your business assets, pending the outcome of the case. Good, Griffin said. There's more, Lena continued. Sawyer's loan is officially in default. They're moving to seize his assets. What assets? That's just it. He doesn't have many, which means they'll be looking at the collateral next. Lena's voice held a note of satisfaction. Except now, they can't touch her business. He's in serious financial trouble, Griffin. The offer was delivered the next day. Full repayment of the $20,000. A binding agreement regarding Griffin's business. A private signed statement admitting to the fraud. And a voluntary relocation with a non-return clause for 2 years. He's taking the deal, Lena reported to Griffin. His attorney says he's already looking at opportunities in Seattle. Griffin nodded, feeling the second piece of his plan click into place. Sawyer would be gone, the money would be returned, and his business would be protected. Now there was only one piece left. Maeve. That evening, as Griffin sat in his apartment above the workshop, he received a text from Maeve. We need to talk. Please. About us, about the future. For the first time in weeks, Griffin replied. Tomorrow. The park. Same bench. Noon at IT was time to finish this. Griffin arrived at the park early again, watching the morning fog lift from the lake. The bench where he'd met Maeve weeks earlier sat empty, waiting. So much had changed since that conversation. So much would change after today that he felt oddly calm, like a craftsman surveying a nearly completed project. Each piece had been measured, cut, and assembled with precision. Now it was time for the final joinery, the last steps that would bring it all together. Maeve approached from the path, her steps hesitant. She looked different, thinner, paler, her usual polished appearance frayed at the edges. Griffin remained seated, watching her approach. Thank you for meeting me, she said as she sat beside him, echoing her word from their last meeting. Griffin nodded once. Waiting, I heard about Sawyer. Maeve began. About the settlement. About him leaving. Did he tell you? Yes. She looked down at her hands. He's angry. Says you're destroying his life. Actions have consequences. So that's what this is about. Maeve looked up, her eyes tired. Punishing us? No. Griffin replied simply. Protecting myself. From what? From me? The hurt in her voice seemed genuine. Griffin, I made a mistake. A terrible one. But I love you. I want to fix this. Some things can't be fixed, Maeve. His voice was quiet but firm. Some lines, Once crossed, can't be uncrossed. So that's it. Tears welled in her eyes. 10 years of marriage, over because of one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, Griffin corrected. It was a series of choices. Choices that showed me where I stood in your priorities. That's not fair, isn't it? Griffin finally turned to face her fully. You told me he was more important than me. You gave him our money without telling me. You put my business at risk. When faced with a choice between him and me, you chose him. Every time. I was confused, Maeve insisted. He manipulated me. You've seen the messages, you know how he is. And yet you let him, Griffin pointed out. You let him come between us. You let him influence you against me. Those were your choices, Maeve. Not his. Maeve fell silent, unable to deny it. Griffin continued, his voice steady. I filed for divorce this morning. The words hung in the air between them. Maeve's breath caught. What? The papers will be delivered to the house tomorrow. Griffin watched her face, the shock and pain registering. Lena handled the filing. Griffin, no. Maeve reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Please, we can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start. It's done, Maeve. His voice was final. The divorce cites emotional abandonment, breach of marital trust, and concealed debt. Given the evidence, Lena believes it will move quickly. Evidence? You're treating our marriage like a crime scene. You made it one when you betrayed me, Griffin replied simply. When you conspired with Sawyer behind my back. Conspired? Maeve laughed bitterly through her tears. Listen to yourself. This isn't a legal case, Griffin. This is our life. Our love. Was our love, Griffin corrected. Past tense. I don't believe that, Maeve insisted. I know you still love me. Otherwise, why go through all this? Why not just walk away? Griffin considered her question. Because I believe in accountability. In consequences. That's not love. That's control. No, Maeve. It's justice. Griffin stood up, needing distance from her. You and Sawyer tried to take what was mine, my trust, my home, my business. And now you're facing the consequences. That's not love. That's control. No, Maeve. It's justice. Griffin stood up, needing distance from her. You and Sawyer tried to take what was mine, my trust, my home, my business. And now you're facing the consequences. So you get everything, and I get nothing? Anger sparked through her tears. Is that your justice? You'll get exactly what the law allows, Griffin replied. Half of the joint assets, minus the $20,000 you gave to Sawyer. The business is mine, secured legally last week. The house. He paused. I'm keeping the house. You can't do that. I can and I have, Griffin said calmly. The mortgage is underwater after the refinance you and Sawyer convinced me to do for home improvements that never happened. Another detail that came to light during discovery. Maeve's face paled. That was for Sawyer's podcast equipment, Griffin finished. I know. Jonas found the receipts. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself, Griffin corrected. From you and Sawyer. Maeve stood up, facing him. This isn't over, Griffin. I'll fight this. On what grounds? Griffin asked quietly. The evidence is clear, Maeve. The paper trail, the messages, the testimony from friends who saw what was happening. You betrayed our marriage. You put my business at risk. You lied repeatedly. I made mistakes. Maeve conceded, her voice breaking. But this is cruel, Griffin. This is calculated. Yes, Griffin agreed. It is calculated. Just like what you and Sawyer did. I never meant to hurt you, Maeve whispered. But you did. Griffin's voice softened slightly. And now it's done. What happens next? Maeve asked, defeat creeping into her tone. You'll be served papers tomorrow. You have 30 days to respond. Given the evidence, Lena recommends you accept the terms. It will be faster, cleaner. And if I don't, then we go to court, Griffin replied simply. And everything comes out. Every message, every deception, every betrayal. Is that what you want? Maeve looked away. You've thought of everything. I had to. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 10 years and all that had been lost hanging between them. I did love you, Maeve said finally, her voice small. I still do. Griffin studied her face, memorizing it one last time. Goodbye, Maeve. He turned and walked away, each step measured and deliberate. He didn't look back, even as he heard her begin to cry. The fallout was swift and decisive. Maeve was served divorce papers the next morning, as promised. The terms were fair but firm. Griffin kept the business and the underwater house. Maeve would receive half of the remaining joint savings after the repayment of the $20,000 from Sawyer. Her retirement account remained hers, his remained his. Clean, precise, final.by evening, word had spread among their friend group. Delia called to check on Griffin. "How are you holding up?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "I'm fine," Griffin replied, and meant it. "Working on a new commission. Keeping busy. Maeve called me," Delia said carefully. "She's not doing well." Griffin said nothing. "She says you won't even talk to her," Delia continued. "That you've frozen her out completely. The lawyers are handling things now," Griffin explained. "It's cleaner this way." "Is that all it is?" Delia pressed. "Or is this part of making her face consequences?" Griffin considered the question. "Both, I suppose." Delia sighed. "I understand why you're doing this, Griffin. I do. But be careful. Don't let this change who you are." "It already has," Griffin admitted. "But not in the way you're thinking. I'm clearer now. More focused." Griffin threw himself into his work, starting earlier and finishing later than usual. The workshop became his sanctuary, the apartment above it his refuge. Jonas worked alongside him, a quiet, steady presence. Harper visited often, bringing food and updates from the outside world. One evening, she arrived with news. "Maeve came by the bakery again today," she reported, setting a bag of fresh bread on the workbench. "As for you." Griffin continued measuring a piece of maple. "What did you tell her?" "That you were working," Harper replied. "She looked terrible, Griffin. Like she hasn't slept in days." "Not my concern anymore." Harper studied her brother. "You don't mean that?" Griffin set down his measuring tape and looked at her. "I do. She made her choice. Now she has to live with it." "People can change," Harper said quietly. "They can learn from mistakes. Some mistakes are too big to come back from." Griffin picked up his pencil, marking the wood. Some betrayals cut too deep. A week later, the hammer fell. Maeve, on advice from her attorney, accepted the divorce terms. The process would be expedited, completed within months, rather than the year it might have taken otherwise. "She's not contesting anything," Lena reported during their meeting. "Not the asset division, not the house, nothing." "Why not?" Griffin asked, surprised despite himself. "Because she can't," Lena explained. "The evidence is too strong." Her lawyer advised her that fighting would only prolong the inevitable and potentially expose more damaging information. Griffin nodded slowly. "So it's done." "Almost," Lena confirmed. "There's just a matter of personal items at the house. She's requested time to collect her things." "When?" "This weekend, if that works for you." Lena looked at him carefully. "You don't have to be there. In fact, it might be better if you weren't." Griffin considered this. "I'll be at the workshop." 2 days later, Griffin watched from his workshop window as Maeve's car pulled up to the house across the street. She wasn't alone. Her sister Emma was with her, along with a friend Griffin didn't recognize. They began carrying boxes into the house. Griffin turned away, focusing on the cabinet he was building. But his attention kept drifting to the window, to the glimpses of Maeve moving between house and CAR.BY mid-afternoon. They had loaded several boxes and suitcases. As they prepared to leave, Maeve looked across the street at the workshop. For a moment, Griffin thought she might come over. Instead, she got into her car and drove away. That evening, Griffin walked through the house, noting what was gone. Maeve had taken only her clothes, her personal items, and a few pieces of furniture that had been hers before the marriage. The rest remained, a shell of their former life, together. Their bedroom, his bedroom. Now the closet was half empty. The bathroom counter missing her makeup and creams. On her nightstand, a small ceramic dish she'd forgotten, still containing her wedding ring. Griffin picked it up, the small gold band gleaming in the fading light. He designed it himself, working with a jeweler to create something unique and lasting. Like their love was supposed to be, he set it back down and left the room, closing the door behind him. 3 days later, Maeve showed up at the workshop one last time. Griffin was alone when she arrived, Jonas having left early for a doctor's appointment. He heard her car pull up, but didn't stop working, the rhythmic sound of his plane smoothing rough edges from a piece of cherry wood. The workshop door opened, and Maeve stepped inside. She looked worse than before, hair pulled back carelessly, clothes rumpled, dark circles under her eyes. But there was something different in her expression, something beyond desperation, a kind of clarity Griffin hadn't seen in months. "I need to talk to you," she said without preamble. Griffin set down his plane and straightened. "The lawyers. This isn't about the divorce," Maeve interrupted, "or the house, or the money. I've accepted all that." Griffin waited, saying nothing. "Sawyer's gone," Maeve continued. "Left for Seattle, just like you wanted. The money's been returned. The lawsuit's been settled. You won." Still, Griffin remained silent. "I've lost everything." Maeve's voice cracked slightly. "My husband, my home, my job, my friends, even my dignity. You've made sure of that. Your choices led to those consequences," Griffin said quietly. "Not mine. You could have just walked away," Maeve argued. "Filed for divorce, split our assets, moved on. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? You needed to destroy me completely." "I needed to protect myself," Griffin corrected. "And yes, I needed the truth to be known. Not your version, not Sawyer's version. The truth. And what good has it done?" Maeve asked, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "Are you happy now? Has your perfect revenge made you whole again?" Griffin considered the question. This wasn't about happiness or revenge. Then what was it about? Maeve challenged. "Principle," Griffin replied simply. "I don't forgive betrayal. I don't offer second chances to liars. I made that clear from the beginning of our relationship." "People make mistakes, Griffin." "Yes, they do," Griffin agreed. "And then they face the consequences." Maeve shook her head, tears forming. The Griffin the first married had a heart. He understood nuance, complexity. "When did you become so cold?" "I haven't changed, Maeve." Griffin's voice remained steady. "You just never truly saw me." "That's not true," she insisted. "We had 10 years together. I knew you. I loved you." "If you had," Griffin replied quietly, "you would never have made the choices you did." Maeve fell silent, the truth of his words settling between them. "I came here to ask for a second chance," she said finally, her voice small. "To beg, if necessary. I thought maybe, if you saw how sorry I am, how much I've lost, it wouldn't change anything," Griffin finished for her. "So that's it?" Maeve asked, tears flowing freely now. 10 years, over just like that?" "No," Griffin corrected. "Not just like that. After a deliberate series of choices that you made. Choices to betray my trust, to risk my business, to choose another man over your husband. Sawyer manipulated me." Maeve tried again. "You've seen the messages. You know how he is." "Yes, I have," Griffin acknowledged. "And yes, he did. But you let him, Maeve. You chose to listen to him over me. You chose to hide things from me. You chose to cross lines you knew couldn't be uncrossed." Maeve wiped at her tears. "I've lost him too, you know. When the money dried up, when the lawsuit hit, he ran. Just like you said he would." "I'm not surprised," Griffin said. "So I have nothing," Maeve whispered. "No one. You have yourself," Griffin replied. "And the lesson that actions have consequences." Maeve looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Do you feel anything at all? See me like this? Knowing what you've done?" Griffin paused, considering her question honestly. "I feel certainty that I've done what needed to be done. What was right? Right?" Maeve laughed bitterly. "You destroyed me, and you think that's right?" "You destroyed yourself," Griffin corrected. "I just made sure the pieces couldn't harm me in their fall." Maeve stared at him, something like understanding finally dawning in her eyes. "You really meant it, didn't you? All those years ago, when you told me you don't forgive betrayal." "I never say things I don't mean," Griffin replied. "I thought it was just words," Maeve admitted. "I never imagined that I would hold you to the same standard I hold myself." Griffin finished. "That was your mistake." They stood in silence for a moment, the last threads of their connection fraying with each passing second. "I loved you," Maeve said finally. "Despite everything, I still do." "Love without loyalty is meaningless," Griffin replied, turning back to his work. "You made your choice, and I kept my promise. I don't forgive liars. Maeve stood there a moment longer, as if waiting for something more. When nothing came, she turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Goodbye, Griffin." He didn't look up, didn't respond. The only sound was the steady scrape of his plane against wood, smoothing rough edges into something clean and precise. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized with clinical efficiency, the papers arriving on a Tuesday morning along with the mail. Griffin signed them at his workbench, the ink dark against the white paper. Final, irreversible, life settled into new patterns. The workshop thrived, with more commissions than Griffin and Jonas could handle. They hired a third craftsman, a young woman named Adrian with steady hands and a natural feel for wood. Harper's Bakery expanded, opening a second location across town. Jonas was promoted to partner in the workshop, his name added to the business cards and signage. Life moved forward, as it always does. Griffin sold the house, unable to live with the echoes of what had been. He bought a smaller place closer to the workshop, with a garden in the back and large windows that let in the light. He filled it with his own furniture, pieces he'd crafted over the years. Simple, solid, honest out of Maeve, he heard little. She'd moved to Portland's east side, taken a job at a smaller firm. Started over, as people do. They had no contact, no reason to speak. The separation was complete, the break clean. Sawyer remained in Seattle, his podcast dreams apparently abandoned. According to Harper, who heard it from Emma, he was working sales again, living in a studio apartment, starting over too. Justice, of a sort, that on a rainy Thursday evening, Griffin was working late at the shop when Lena stopped by, a folder tucked under her arm. "Just dropped off the final paperwork for the business restructuring," she explained, setting the folder on his workbench. "Everything's official now. Griffin and Jonas Fine Woodcraft, LLC. "Thank you," Griffin said, wiping sawdust from his hands. "For all of it." Lena nodded, professional as always. "Just doing my job." "It was more than that," Griffin acknowledged. "You helped me protect what mattered." Something softened in Lena's expression. "How are you doing, Griffin?" "Really?" He considered the question, not with the automatic fine he gave to most who asked, but with genuine reflection. "I'm rebuilding." "That's good," Lena said softly. "Rebuilding is good." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the rain tapping against the workshop roof. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Griffin asked finally, not to discuss legal matters. Lena smiled, a small, precise expression that suited her. "I'd like that. Tomorrow? There's a place on Burnside I've been meaning to try." 3 o'clock, Lena suggested. "I have meetings until then." 3 works, Griffin agreed. After she left, Griffin continued working, the steady rhythm of his hands on wood as soothing as ever. But there was something else now, a small, quiet warmth he hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not yet, but something like potential, like foundation. 1 year to the day after Maeve spoke those fateful words, "He was here before you. He's more important than you." Griffin walked through the rain to his apartment above the workshop. The apartment had changed in recent months. Lena's books on the shelves, her precise handwriting on the calendar by the door. Her presence, subtle but unmistakable, in the space that had once been his alone. The renovation on her condo had finished months ago, but somehow she had never quite moved back. They hadn't discussed it, hadn't needed to. It had simply happened, like water finding its natural course. Griffin hung his wet jacket by the door and moved to the kitchen, where the scent of coffee and fresh bread greeted him. Harper had stopped by earlier, dropping off a loaf from her bakery. Lena had left a note beside it. "At courthouse until 6. Dinner after?" He smiled at her precise handwriting, at the certainty of her plans. So different from the chaos of before, from the constant pushing and pulling that had characterized his life with Maeve. Griffin poured himself coffee and moved to the window, watching rain streak the glass. From here, he could see his workshop below, the lights still on as Jonas and Adrian finished up for the day. Beyond that, the neighborhood where he had built his new life, piece by careful piece. His phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "Party still on for Saturday?" "New bakery needs christening," Griffin replied. "Wouldn't miss it. Lena and I will bring wine." The workshop door opened below, and Jonas and Adrian emerged, laughing about something as they hurried to their cars through the rain. Griffin watched them go, feeling a sense of satisfaction at the life he had constructed. The business was thriving, his craft respected, his circle small but loyal, and there had been justice. Not revenge. He had never sought to punish, only to set things right, to ensure that Maeve and Sawyer understood the consequences of their actions, that the truth was known. Maeve had lost much: her marriage, her home, her social standing. But she was rebuilding too, according to Harper, who still occasionally heard news through Emma. A new job, a smaller apartment, a quieter life. Lessons learned. Perhaps Sawyer had fared worse. The podcast venture had failed completely, the loan defaulted, his reputation in Portland destroyed. Last Griffin had heard, he was struggling in Seattle, unable to recreate the network of friends he had once manipulated for his benefit. Justice, of a sort. Not by Griffin's hand directly, but as a natural consequence of truth revealed. The front door opened, and Lena entered, shaking rain from her umbrella. "Court ran late," she explained, hanging her coat beside his. "Judge Williams is thorough to a fault." "I appreciate thoroughness," Griffin replied, pouring her coffee. Lena accepted the cup with a small smile. "I know you do." Later, as they walked to dinner through the rain, sheltered under Lena's large umbrella, Griffin felt a sense of completion, of rightness. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by the certainty of lessons learned and boundaries enforced. He had kept his promise to himself. He had not forgiven the unforgivable, had not compromised his principles. And yet, he had not allowed bitterness to consume him, had not lost himself in the pursuit of justice. Instead, he had rebuilt piece by careful piece. A business strengthened, a new home established, a circle of honest friends maintained. And now, perhaps, a new beginning with someone who understood him, who respected boundaries, who valued truth as he did. As they reached the restaurant, Griffin held the door for Lena, watching her step inside, precise and measured as always. He followed, leaving the rain behind, moving into warmth and light. It wasn't the life he had planned, wasn't the future he had once envisioned. But it was honest, it was earned, and it was his. Victory of a sort, not over Maeve or Sawyer, but over betrayal itself, over the chaos that had threatened to destroy what he had built. Griffin took his seat across from Lena, who was already studying the menu with her characteristic focus. He felt something settle in his chest, something warm and certain. Not happiness, that was too simple a word for the complex emotions he felt, but contentment, perhaps. Peace. The knowledge that he had faced the worst and emerged intact, principles uncompromised, boundaries enforced. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean. Inside, in the warmth and light, Griffin Langley allowed himself to feel, for the first time in a long while, the quiet satisfaction of a battle well fought, a victory well earned. Not through compromise, not through forgiveness, but through principle held firm, through boundaries enforced, through truth revealed that it was enough. It was everything.